Robert Twitchell had just returned from a meeting that left 3 men unconscious in a warehouse basement. His security team waited in the driveway. He walked through the side entrance alone, and that's when he heard it. Not footsteps, not whispers. A quiet scraping sound coming from the kitchen. Metal against ceramic. Rhythmic. Deliberate. He pulled his gun. Any other night, sounds in the dark meant either death or betrayal. Tonight, it meant something that would break him completely. He rounded the corner, weapon raised, and froze. There, on the cold kitchen floor, sat 2 little girls in identical pink dresses. Twins, 7 years old. They were sharing a single plate, taking careful turns eating cold mashed potatoes and week-old chicken that the staff had thrown in the garbage. They looked up at him with eyes that knew exactly what kind of man he was, and the first one whispered, "Please, sir, we'll leave. Just don't hurt our mama. She doesn't know we're here." The second twin, no louder than a breath, "We only came because we were so hungry. We're sorry." Robert's chest tightened. His throat burned. Their mother, Rosie, his maid, was the woman who never complained, never asked for more hours, never said a word about her life outside those mansion walls. He'd worked here for 4 years, and he'd never even learned her name until this moment. Now he understood why she stayed silent. The girls tried to push the plate away, as if giving up the food would somehow protect their mother, as if their hunger mattered less than her job. For a long moment, Robert said nothing. His finger moved off the trigger. Then he quietly put his gun away and did something none of his men would ever believe. Stay with me until the end. Because what he did next didn't just shock his household staff. It didn't just shock his criminal organization. It shocked the man himself. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. Robert Twitchell had built his empire on fear for 28 years. 37 confirmed kills. Control over 60% of the city's underground economy. A man who survived 4 assassination attempts and forgot the faces of everyone he'd ever killed. But he would never forget the faces of 2 little girls in pink dresses who reminded him he used to be human. Robert Twitchell hadn't felt anything in 28 years. Not when he'd ordered his first execution. Not when he'd buried his 3rd wife. Not when he'd watched a man beg for his daughter's life before putting a bullet through both their heads. 37 confirmed kills across a 3-state empire built on cocaine and silence. His $47 million estate sprawled across 12 acres of Tennessee countryside, half fortress, half mausoleum. Security cameras everywhere except where they mattered. The emotional shutdown had started at 6 years old, watching his twin sister Rachel waste away from starvation while their mother chose drugs over groceries. He'd held her skeletal hand as she took her last breath, weighing 42 pounds. By 12, when his mother overdosed in their bathroom, Robert had already learned the most important lesson of his life. Feeling things only makes you weak. But standing in his kitchen at 2:47 a.m., staring at 2 skeletal girls crouched over his garbage like wounded animals, something cracked in his chest. Physical pain, sharp and sudden. The first real sensation he'd experienced in 15 years that wasn't rage or numbness. The older one was 6, exactly Rachel's age when she died. His jaw clenched so hard his molars ground together. "How many times have you come here?" The girl's whisper barely reached him. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 21 nights of these children eating his rotting garbage while he consumed 5-course meals prepared by his private chef 20 feet away on the other side of these walls. And he'd never noticed a thing, just like no one had noticed when his own sister was dying. Just like no one had cared when he and Rachel were the ones starving. Robert's knees protested as he crouched to their level, something his security team had never witnessed in 20 years. The twins stared at him with those impossibly trusting eyes, and he noticed their matching pink dresses, clearly homemade, the fabric oddly familiar. Curtains, he realized. Their mother had sewn their only good clothes from curtain fabric. "Mama is always so tired," Lily whispered, her small hand still clutching his sleeve. "She says she's fine, but she falls asleep standing up sometimes." Emma nodded solemnly. "And she gives us her food at dinner and tells us she already ate. But we know she's lying, Mr. Twitchell. We hear her stomach growling." The words hit him like buckshot to the chest. His own mother had done the same thing, dividing one potato into 3 portions, claiming she'd eaten at work. He'd been 7 when he realized the truth. These girls were barely 5. "What's your mother's name?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "Rosie, sir. Rosie Beeler." 4 years. She'd worked in his mansion for 4 years, cleaned his bathroom, pressed his shirts, scrubbed his floors, and he'd never bothered to learn her name. He'd passed her in hallways 1,000 times, reduced her to furniture, to invisible hands that made his world function. The calculation formed instinctively. Eliminate the problem. Fire her. Problem solved. But those pink dresses made from curtains wouldn't leave his mind. That mother skipping meals. That woman who'd never once asked him for anything, never once made her suffering his concern. His mother's face superimposed over Rosie's. Both women ground to dust by indifferent wealthy men. Robert Twitchell made a decision that night that would either destroy his empire or save the only part of his soul he had left. Rosie's hands trembled as she portioned scrambled eggs onto the staff plates at 5:45 a.m., her movements slow and deliberate. She took nothing for herself. She never did anymore. Food hurt too much. Robert watched from the kitchen doorway, his mind racing with connections he hadn't wanted to make. The careful way she moved, the weight loss, the exhaustion she tried to hide behind perfect posture. "Rosie, my office, now." The color drained from her already pale face. This was it. Termination. She'd been caught somehow. Her daughters had been too careless, left evidence, and now she'd lose everything. She followed him on unsteady legs, her mind cataloging which shelters had the shortest wait lists. Robert closed the door behind them. "How long have your daughters been breaking into my kitchen?" Rosie's knees buckled. She grabbed the desk edge for support. "Please, sir, they're just hungry. I'll pay for everything they ate. Every single thing. I have $37 in savings. I don't care about the food." His voice cut through her panic. "Tell me about your sickness." The dam broke. 8 months she'd been fighting alone. Stage 3 breast cancer. The tumor growing while she scrubbed his floors. The hospital bills stacking up while she portioned food she couldn't afford to eat. The daughters who didn't know their mother was dying because she smiled through the pain every single day. "How much?" Robert's jaw tightened. $180,000. The treatment needs to start within 60 days or... Her voice cracked. "Or my daughters will watch me die." Robert's fists clenched against his desk. He knew exactly what that looked like. He'd watched his own mother waste away the same way, her body consuming itself while he sat helpless at 13 years old. Not again. Robert's hands shook as he dialed Dr. Patricia Chen's private number, the same number reserved for senators and old money families who'd never cleaned their own homes. "I need you here in 1 hour," he said, his voice carrying an edge his household staff had never heard before. Rosie stood frozen in his study, clutching her purse like a shield. "Mr. Twitchell, I can't accept charity. I won't." He turned to face her, and something in his eyes had changed in the past 10 minutes. "This isn't charity. This is me fixing something I should have seen." Dr. Chen arrived in 43 minutes. The examination was swift, clinical, devastating. Aggressive, but treatable with immediate intervention, she said, writing prescriptions with practiced efficiency. 2 weeks ago would have been better. Today will have to do. Robert's lawyer, Gerald Hutchins, arrived 20 minutes later with his briefcase and his perfectly maintained skepticism. He listened to Robert's instructions with increasing alarm. You want to do what? Establish a $180,000 medical fund, immediately, and $600,000 trust funds for both twins, college, futures, everything they'll need. Gerald removed his glasses. Sir, this is unprecedented. Robert's jaw tightened. So was letting a woman die while working in my house. The paperwork took 2 hours. Rosie cried 3 times. Her daughter Sophia called, confused and terrified by her mother's incoherent joy. The twins would never work minimum wage. They would never choose between textbooks and groceries. Robert signed the final document with hands that had built empires, but had never before built hope. His underboss Marco would later say that day was the day Robert Twitchell started a revolution against himself. Robert was already in his office when security called about 2 girls at the gate. Children, sir. They're asking about... The guard hesitated. About the woman from the hospital. He took the stairs 3 at a time. They stood in the circular driveway like lost birds, identical faces streaked with tears, hospital bracelets still on their thin wrists. 8 years old, maybe 9, the same age his sister had been when their mother started forgetting to come home. Is Mama dead? The one on the left spoke first, her voice breaking. Is it our fault for eating your food? The question hit him like a physical blow. He couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. These children thought they'd killed their mother by accepting a meal. She's alive, he managed. She's going to be okay. Both girls collapsed into sobs so violent their legs gave out. Robert crouched beside them, not touching, unsure if touch would frighten them more. His security team stood frozen, weapons trained on nothing, utterly lost. One hardened ex-Marine had tears in his eyes. Come inside, Robert said quietly. Please. He led them through halls that seemed obscene in their luxury. His men parted like the Red Sea, watching their boss guide 2 starving children past million-dollar art they couldn't see through their tears. The guest house had been prepared in 20 minutes. 2 beds with fresh sheets, new clothes in their sizes, warmth, safety, things that should have been basic rights. The chef brought pancakes, scrambled eggs, milk, orange juice. Real food. Too much food. The twins stared at the plates and started crying again. Different tears now, overwhelmed, disbelieving, grateful in a way that made Robert want to burn the world down for failing them. He stood in the doorway, watching them try to eat through their sobs, and saw his sister's ghost finally being fed. You're not invisible anymore, he said softly. Not here. Not ever again. The whispers started in the back rooms of Atlantic City casinos. Twitchell's gone soft, playing daddy to some maid's kid. Within 48 hours, Vincent Castellano made his move, a calculated test disguised as a routine shakedown. His crew hit one of Robert's waterfront properties, expecting negotiation, expecting weakness. They got education instead. Robert's response came at 4 a.m., simultaneous raids on 3 Castellano operations. Not arrests, acquisitions. By sunrise, Vincent had lost $2 million in product, and his nephew was in Robert's office, unharmed but terrified, listening to a very simple message. Tell your uncle I'm more dangerous now. I have something worth protecting, which means I have no limits on what I'll do to anyone who threatens it. Marco found him 2 hours later, reviewing surveillance footage of the operation. Boss, the Castellanos are finished. They're leaving the state. Good. Robert didn't look up. You know what they're saying now? That you're not weak. Marco paused. You're terrifying, more than ever." Robert finally met his eyes. "Because now there's something they can take from me, and I'll burn their entire world to prevent it." The call came that afternoon. Dr. Chen's voice carried cautious triumph. "The surgery was successful. Full remission is possible. She's going to make it, Robert." He thanked her calmly, professionally, ended the call. And then, alone in his office at 3 a.m. after visiting Rosie's sleeping form in recovery, Robert Twitchell cried for the first time in 30 years. They'd all misunderstood. Compassion hadn't weakened Robert Twitchell. It had given him a reason to be the monster he'd always been, but aimed at protecting instead of destroying. Robert stared at the manila envelope like it might detonate. 3 weeks since Rosie's collapse, and his office had become a war room of medical reports, experimental treatment protocols, and financial projections that made his CFO physically ill. The twins were thriving. Proper meals, consistent bedtime, the kind of stability that made them laugh without looking over their shoulders first. He opened the envelope. A crayon drawing slipped out. 4 stick figures, wobbly and perfect. Labels in careful child handwriting. Mama, with yellow hair. Me, and me too, holding hands. And in the corner, slightly apart but smiling, Mr. Robert. The title at the top, Our Family. Something shattered in his chest. His hands shook as he reached for his phone, vision blurring. "Get me guardianship papers," he told his lawyer, voice fracturing. "Backup custody. If Rosie doesn't survive, those girls don't go into the system." Silence on the other end. Then, softly, "That's actually beautiful, sir." Robert pressed his palm against his eyes. "My sister died because no one with power chose to see her. These girls will live because I refuse to be that person." The words came out jagged, raw. "I've built empires, destroyed competitors. I can save 2 children." He looked at the drawing again, at the stick figure labeled Mr. Robert, with the crooked smile and oversized hands, drawn by a little girl who'd decided he belonged. The billionaire who'd orchestrated the downfall of 37 enemies, who couldn't remember half their faces, knew he would never forget the 2 small faces that had reminded him he was still capable of being human. 6 months later, Rosie Beeler walked through the manor gardens without assistance, her steps steady and sure. The chemotherapy had ended 3 weeks ago. Full remission, the doctors said, a medical miracle, though Robert knew better. Miracles required money, and he'd spent plenty. She'd gained back the weight. Color had returned to her cheeks. When she smiled now, it didn't look like an apology for existing. Robert found her by the rose bushes, watching Emma and Sophia chase butterflies across the lawn. "I have a proposal," he said. "Stay in the guest house, permanently, as estate manager." Rosie turned, confused. "Salary's $120,000 a year. Full medical coverage for life, dental, vision, whatever you need." He kept his tone businesslike. "The twins are settled, good schools. Stability matters for children." Tears welled in her eyes. "Mr. Twitchell." "Why are you doing this?" Robert looked past her to where the girls were laughing, their voices carrying across manicured lawns that had never heard such sounds. "I watched my mother die from poverty while rich men looked away. I won't be that man." The twins had flourished. Private school uniforms replaced thrift store clothes. They'd gained weight, grown confident. They still called him Mr. Robert, he insisted on it, but every picture they drew included a tall figure in black standing protectively nearby. Last week, Emma had shown him her artwork. "That's you," she'd said, pointing to the crayon figure. "You're part of our family now." He'd said nothing. What could he say? "You gave us more than money," Rosie said softly. "You gave us a future." Robert Twitchell was still feared, still dangerous, still controlled an empire built on violence. But now he understood the difference between power and purpose. He'd never forget the faces of 37 people he'd killed, but he also wouldn't forget the faces of 2 little girls who reminded him he was human. Robert stared at the crude birthday card in his hands, the paper wrinkled from small fingers that had worked with more care than skill. Stick figures drawn in crayon, a tall man standing between 2 smaller shapes, the words scrawled across the top in uneven letters. Happy birthday to the best protector ever. He was 50 years old today. Half a century of breathing. 8 years since that blood-soaked bathroom floor where everything changed. They made it themselves, Rosie said quietly, watching him from the doorway. Wouldn't let me help. The twins, 8 now. Impossibly tall, impossibly alive, hovered nearby with expectant grins. Robert's throat constricted. He'd killed 37 people in his lifetime, murdered them with calculation and precision. And somehow these 2 children looked at him like he was something worth celebrating. Later that evening, after cake and laughter that still felt foreign in his bones, Rosie pulled him aside. I finalized the guardianship papers today. Robert froze. What? If anything happens to me, they're yours. Her eyes were steady, certain. Your family, Robert. They see it. I see it. Family. The word landed like a punch. He thought of his twin sister, taken at 6 years old, her absence a wound that had festered for 44 years. All those decades spent believing her death meant something was fundamentally broken in him. Unfixable. They saved me more than I saved them, he whispered. Rosie smiled. I know. That night, Robert sat alone in the darkness, the birthday card still in his hands. 37 people dead by his hands, but 2 people alive because of them. Those same hands that had dealt death had learned, somehow, to protect life. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage, 2 hungry children whispering, "Please don't hurt our mama," can resurrect a soul everyone thought was dead. Robert Twitchell never became a good man, but he became a man worth saving, and that was enough. The cafe hummed with the quiet sounds of mid-afternoon, the hiss of the espresso machine, the gentle clink of cups against saucers, conversations flowing like water around them. Sarah watched her father across the table, this man who'd chosen her when biology said he didn't have to, who'd fought for her when the world tried to tear them apart. You know what I realized? She said softly. Redemption isn't about erasing who you were. It's about choosing who you'll become. Thomas reached across the table, his hand warm over hers. And you chose to be exactly who you were meant to be. She smiled, but there was something fierce in it now. Something that hadn't been there 6 months ago. We both did. Outside, the city stretched endlessly, full of stories waiting to be told, families being built in 1,000 different ways. Blood didn't make you family. Love did. Sacrifice did. Showing up every single day, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt, that made you family. Sarah squeezed her father's hand once more, then stood. She had a shift starting in an hour, and unlike those early desperate days, she'd be walking in with her head high. No shame, no apologies, just a woman who knew exactly who she was and who loved her. Because family isn't about blood. It's about who you'd fight for, who you'd choose again and again, no matter what the world throws at you. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that prove love is stronger than DNA, that redemption is always possible, that family is what you make it. Next time, a billionaire discovers his chef's son is a genius. What he does with that knowledge changes 3 generations. See you in the next story.